Welcome to this introductory session on strategic management. We will cover two aspects of strategic management. One is, of course, we'll try to get an understanding of the term strategy. And two, get an overview of the strategic management process. There are several definitions of the term strategy. So I would like to discuss two of those. One is by Chandler. So Chandler defines strategy as one, the determination of the long-term goals of the organization. Two, he talks in terms of the ascertainment of the alternative courses of action to achieve the long-term goals. So here brings the element of choice. There are different approaches or paths to realize the long-term goals of the organization. So ascertaining what are those choices that we have to achieve the long-term goals. The third dimension that he talks about in the definition of strategy is adoption of a course of action, exercising the strategic choice of adopting a particular course of action to achieve the long-term goals. And the fourth is the allocation of resources. So these are the four dimensions of the definition which Chandler offers to understand strategy. The determination of long-term goals, the ascertainment of alternative courses of action, the adoption of a course of action, and finally the allocation of resources to the implementation of the strategy or moving in the direction of achieving the long-term goals. The second definition comes from Mintzberg. So Mintzberg looks at strategy in terms of the 5 P's, the letter P, the 5 P's. So according to Mintzberg, a strategy is one, a plan. A plan, as we all know, is looking forward. So he says that strategy is number one, a plan. 2, strategy is a ploy. When he refers the when he uses the term ploy, what it means is strategy is also a tactic. Right? At the end of the day, strategy is all about winning against competition, winning over the competition. So organization plan of how to win over the competition, that's the first P. 2, employ, organizations employ tactics to win over the competition. The third is pattern. So when we use the word pattern in reference to strategy, what we mean is the strategy represents a consistent behavior, a consistent conduct of the organization towards its goals, achievement of goals, the processes it follows. So strategy represents a pattern. The fourth P is strategy is a perspective. So strategy is the manner in which an organization views the external environment. Environment is very subjective. So organizations may take a view of the environment, an optimistic view of the environment. They may see a lot of opportunities in the environment. They may see minimal threats in the environment. That's a perspective that sometimes an organization takes of the environment. Organizations may also take a pessimistic view. They may see that the opportunities are very few and the threats are very prominent, very significant. So organizations vary in terms of how they view the environment. So what Mintzberg says is that the strategy is also a perspective that organizations take on the environment. The fifth P is strategy is a position. Strategy is a position that the organization take in the marketplace. So finally, we all know that strategy is about winning in the marketplace, winning over the competition. And how do we win over the competition? By taking a position in the marketplace. So an organization may take a position of a cost leader. Patanjali is an example. An organization may take a position as being different to the competition. Apple is an example. Different in terms of the features, in terms of the functionalities, in terms of the the design of the product, etc. Apple is an example. It's a different differentiation strategy. That's how Apple positioned itself in the marketplace. Maybe I'm costlier, but I'm different. I'm better than the others, right? Or it could be a focus coupled with cost leadership or coupled with differentiation. Raymond's is an example of focus. Focus in terms of geography, focus in terms of demography. So Raymond's targets primarily the men's segment of menswear. So that's a focus strategy. So Mintzberg talks of strategy in terms of, or defines strategy in terms of these 5 characteristics, the 5 P's, what he calls the 5 P's. Let's get now an overview of the strategic management process, or what it comprises, what strategic management comprises. I have a slide to share here, which yes. Strategic management can be viewed in terms of the strategic formulation part of the strategic management process, the strategic implementation, and finally the strategic control. So let's look at strategic formulation. The strategic formulation process ends up with the strategic plan. So what happens in the strategic plan formulation? We do an external analysis of the environment. We do an internal analysis of the organization. We determine what strategic direction do we want to take. And finally, of course, exercise a choice after identifying the options. So these are the 4 dimensions of the strategic formulation. So what do we do in external analysis? So here it's important to understand that strategic management is all about identifying the opportunities in the external environment, identifying the threats in the external environment, and understanding what are the strengths that the organization possesses, which are internal, and of course the weaknesses of the organization, and aligning the strengths to exploit the opportunities, minimizing the weaknesses to exploit the opportunities, or aligning the strengths to minimize the threats, or minimizing the weaknesses so as to minimize the threats. So this is what is strategic management at the end of the day. So we do an external analysis through the techniques such as, or the tools such as the pestle analysis, which is of course understanding the macro environment or the general environment, and of course to understand the internal environment, the internal environment, we have the tools like the strengths and weaknesses, identifying our competitive advantages, ascertaining whether our competitive advantage that we have is sustainable or not. So when we talk of course, the direction, we talk in terms of identifying or ascertaining what is our vision, where do we see ourselves 5 years, 10 years from now, and determining our mission. What is the purpose? Why do we exist? What purpose do we fulfill as an organization, etc. That's all comes under the strategic direction. So as a result of all these processes, we end up with a strategic plan. which, as I mentioned, gives us the direction, which gives us the strategies in terms of the corporate strategies, the business strategies, the operation strategies. When I say corporate strategies, what I mean is, strategies at the level of the corporate, the organization, what business is to be in, what the business is to exist. Strategies such as mergers, amalgamations, etc. They come under the corporate strategies. Business strategies, we already discussed about cost leadership, differentiation, focus, etc. These are the business level, at the level of a business, individual business. How do we get to be more competitive? How do we win over competition? These are all part of the business strategies. So a conglomerate like Reliance has the telecommunications business, it has the petrochemical business, it has the oil exploration. Obviously, at the corporate level, Reliance is concerned with what businesses to be in, what businesses to get out of, and what businesses to pursue organically, or is it by acquisitions, etc. So when it talks about business, it has a different business strategy for a telecom business, a different business strategy for a petrochemicals business, etc. And within this, of course, the operational or the functional strategies, the finance strategies, the marketing strategies, the HR strategies, etc. And how do we build the organization so as to achieve or work towards the strategies, the structure, the systems, the process. So these are all the different dimensions of the strategic plan. Well, of course, once the strategic plan is made, we have to implement the strategy through creating the competencies, etc. And of course, we also need to monitor whether the strategies are actually moving in the right direction to achieve our long-term goals. So this is all part of strategic control. There are various tools, models, strategic models, theories which help us work in this in the strategic management process, which we'll cover in the subsequent lessons. So thank you for being a part of this lesson. We'll go into details in the subsequent sessions. Thank you.